Thank you, Dick. I notice your Dutch is improving over the years. First, I have to apologize as being a monolinguist fellow from wherever I'm from, San Francisco. And I am literally, I'm not happy that I am said so. So if you won't mind, I'll give the rest of the presentation in Hungarian. Will that work? The other comment I would have on his introduction is, in statistics, you may have heard the English phrase, lies, damn lies in statistics. And that's all I'll say about his introduction. Okay, I have an interesting story to tell you. It will be relatively short, because I don't want to turn this into lots of charts and geeky things like equations and statistics. So let's get started. One thing you should have to know that if you don't want to read the slide, if you look often in the, hang on, I screwed that up, bear with me a sec. Let's see how to do this. I thought I had it down. Oh. Okay, forget it. Anyway, all you have to do is look at the upper right hand corner, and there's a cartoon image. Will tell you everything you need to know that is on the slide. So you don't have to read it. That's not on every slide, but often. Okay, the Stargate Archives. Who are the authors? Dick introduced me. My co-author, and really deserves much of the credit for what you're about to hear today, is Sonali Bhatmarla. She's a PhD clinical psychologist from India, and she loves to point out to me, she says, Ed, I read and write and speak better English than you do. Please shut up. She's really correct on that. Okay. First of all, we are changing the definition of our phenomenon. Informational side, which is sometimes referred to as anomalous cognition, extrasensory perception, remote viewing, we've lumped that into gaining information by parapsychological means by side. An atypical perceptual ability that allows the acquisition of non-inferential information arising from a distant point in space-time. That's sort of a physics definition of what we're dealing with. What is the Stargate program? First of all, it lasted for 23 years. It started in 1972 through 1995. It was sponsored by the U.S. government for a rather substantial amount of money in the U.S., about $20 million, which sounds like a lot of money, but if you break that down over 23 years, it's not a lot of money. And since we were doing it at Stanford Research Institute, they took a lot of overhead money. So by the time the money got to us, we could buy lunch, maybe. And the main thing were three things that we were doing. One mission. This was not an academic program. Its job was to spy. In other words, gather intelligence on the former Soviet Union and China and other East Bloc things. And if we could spy on them, hey, they could spy on us. So we wanted to know whether or not, to what could we defend against that. And lastly, to conduct application-oriented research. In other words, not research to figure out how this works, but to figure out the best way to collect the data. Should you face east? Should you eat M&M candies, stand on your head, those kinds of things. Okay. Funding was $19 million, and I've converted it into euros for you there to give you an idea. Primary source of the archives. The archives are a collection of books, which you'll see about, which is all the material that was formerly classified, militarily classified by the U.S. government, is no longer classified, so I'm able to report it in some detail. And the CIA, excuse me, CIA released about 89,000 pages of material from which we created these books you'll see about. This is fun. This is a memo released by the CIA, signed by, the signature on the lower side is William Colby. At the time, he was the director of the Central Intelligence Agency. And what I love about this example is I love to beat up on the CIA every time I get a chance. And here's one example. You see some things that are redacted, blacked out. Well, there are about 4 or 5 versions of this memo released, and none of the redactions match. So in a lot of the material that we were able to gather, we could get completely clean, unredacted versions because they didn't know how to put all the redactions together. And what's funny about the one thing that's redacted, not the name of the guy. His signature is the only thing that's redacted. What in the world are they doing? Okay, here's a list of the various documents that were in the release. There were many copies of the same things. There were many examples from published journals. There were articles in the newspaper. They even have what are called transmittal slips. What that means is, if I had a classified document and I was going to give it to Dick and he had the classification, I would say, okay, here's a document number so-and-so, I'm giving it to you, you sign it, and that's a transmittal slip. It has no other information on it at all, and half of the stuff they have there is that kind of stuff in this release. So don't go to the CIA website. You can do that on your own and download all these documents and see what I'm talking about. Okay. These are the archives. It's published by McFarland, and I have two examples of them here. There were four. This is the last one. We're done with it. This is 715 pages long. There are two other copies which I don't have here. First one was on remote viewing, and you'll see this here. The first one is remote viewing in the time period from 1974 to 1984. Everything you'd ever want to know about informational psi or remote viewing is in that document that took place in that time period, from what we knew, the best research we could do at that time. Volume 2 is the same thing, except a decade later. And Volume 3, which I do have here, is all on psychokinesis, mind over matter. Pardon me. And the last one, which I also have here, is mainly government reports and memos and that sort of thing within the government arguing about our program, complaining about it or not complaining about it, plus all the operational spying material is in that last volume. Here are the four covers. Two of them are here. The last two on the right are here. We have a foreword in all four volumes by former Secretary of Defense, the Honorable William S. Cohen. He was Secretary of Defense in the Clinton administration. And he wrote a magnificent foreword claiming how well this stuff worked for the intelligence community. He was on the Senate Select Committee for Oversight for Intelligence, so he knew what he was talking about. The second foreword is by someone many of you may know, Dr. Richard Broughton. He was formerly at the University of Northampton. Then he was president of the SPR in London, and he's now, I think, the treasurer of the SPR in London. And he wrote a foreword for these books also. From the perspective, is there anything in this collection of material that can inform current researchers? So it was a very interesting thing that he wrote for us. Okay, here's a site map of our program. First, primarily, was to gather intelligence. And what we had to do with that is figure out how do you take ESP, or informational psi data, and integrate it with the other intelligence gathering materials within the government. What's the best way can you collect data? Lastly, how do you know when someone said, hey, I see a tank in this building, is it right, wrong, or in between? What kind of indication, a priori indication, do we have whether it's right or wrong? And frankly, we failed at that job. If we could spy on them, they could spy on us. So foreign assessment, what were the threats out there during the Cold War, and could we develop countermeasures? The answer to the last question is no. And finally, there are two different types of research, which I've mentioned earlier: application research, just how to get the product better, and lastly, some basic research, which primarily happened in the second decade of the program. On top of all this was amazing amounts of oversight. And what I mean by that is the company that I worked for at the time, Stanford Research Institute, were very, very concerned that we were cheating or somehow doing bad research. So that organization had oversight of us. And then later on, the government said, well, maybe the company has some financial interest to allow these guys to cheat. So there were external oversight as well. I like to joke we have more oversight than a test dummy at a dentist convention. Usually I have a different orifice in mind, but that'll work. And overlaying all of that is this, politics. I spent probably 40% of my time in Washington when I was the director of this program, begging for money on my knees. I wore out many knees in my suit. Okay. From the spine data, we conclude that we are done. Everything else is detail. Probably anybody in here, especially my dear colleague Dick, will agree with this. We do not need any more evidential data, period, end of story. And what I have over here, the word done in a whole bunch of languages, however not in Dutch. Why do I say that? First of all assessments of the spine data, success or failures, were determined not by the researchers, not by us. It was done by the people who said, we have a mission, we want you to see, do this, and then they would take the data and say whether it was good, bad, or indifferent, and give us no feedback about how good we were doing. Which is rather frustrating. The intelligence community kept returning back for more spine missions. Human-centered intelligence gathering is by definition difficult to interpret, of any kind. Spies of World War II crawling around looking through field glasses, as we humans were terrible observers of what's going on, and then more worse, we're terrible reporters of what's going on. Because psychic spying is not immune to this difficult interpretation seen in normal spying, we have named the psi method RV HUMINT. HUMINT means intelligence, HUM in English means human. There's SIG-INT, meaning signals intelligence, COM-INT, meaning communication intelligence, and so on. So we invented a new term, RV, meaning remote viewing human. RV human has a number of advantages over traditional human. No one is placed in harm's way. We don't have a spy sneaking around behind enemy lines and therefore can't get shot at. They're sitting in a lab and it's really cheap. A bottle of scotch will get you everything you need. And finally, we focus on the details, determining the physics, physiology, and psychology of the phenomena. That's what we're able to do at this point. I claim ESP is real and is useful. During the time period, we had 504 separate spying missions. And these were set apart over 19 different federal agencies. Let me take a shortcut here for a moment. Suppose one of you wanted to open up a restaurant here in Amsterdam. I understand there are very few restaurants. We need a new one. Is that right? And you had a beautiful little place that only had 19 people that could fit in your restaurant. But you hired the best chef from all over the Netherlands. And they came and you had a marvelous wine cellar and you had gorgeous decor. And of those 19 people that filled your restaurant on opening night, 17 of them kept coming back for the next week. You would obviously conclude you did something right with your restaurant. Hold that thought. Of these 19 agencies, 17 of them returned for additional missions, and you're going to see a chart of it here. On the left side is what we did at Stanford Research Institute. The 7 was from the Central Intelligence Agency. The CIA, which is on public record saying this stuff didn't work. Well, if it didn't work, why'd you come back 7 times? And in fact, with the government program, they came back, I can read better here, they came back 34 additional times. And so the tall bars tell you the number of times these various agencies came back with other missions. The all-time record is something called, that's the biggest spike on the right-hand side there, is a joint task force, military task force. They came back 172 times with different missions. What were their mission? Their mission was drug interdiction. In other words, they had learned by some other means a boat was leaving Hong Kong or Singapore or something like that, and they wanted to know where 1 week from today, precognition, can we pick up that boat and search it? We were really good at that job because they kept coming back over and over again. Not only that, when the U.S. authorities boarded the boat and said, well, you think there's drugs on these boats, but there isn't any, the remote viewers would say, go to the starboard aft part of the boat and take a panel off the wall. And when they do that, they found hundreds of pounds of things like cocaine and heroin and so on. We were really good at that job. How we were really good at that job, how this works, I have absolutely little idea about how that works. Professor Jessica Utz, she worked as a visiting scientist in our lab. In 2016, she was the US top statistician. She was president of the American Statistical Association. And in her presidential address, which I don't have here, she said this meets all the standard definitions of what you need for something real. And she said that in her presidential address at the American Statistical Association. This is part of what she said. Using the standards applied to any other area in science, it is concluded that psychic functioning has been well established. The results of the study examined are far beyond what is expected by chance. Arguments that these results could be due to methodological flaws in experiments are soundly refuted. Effects of similar magnitude to those found in government-sponsored research at SRI and SAIC, that's Science Applications International Corporation, have been replicated in a number of laboratories across the world. Such controversy cannot be readily explained by claims of flaws and fraud. Often, this program is thought of being CIA funded, and this is the funding graph. You don't have to know all those organizations, but the third one from the right is the CIA. They gave us 1% of the total funding, so this was not a CIA funded program. It's never a good idea to do science or anything else on testimonials, because those are all subject to all kinds of things, who did it and for what reasons. You know, with all that as a caveat upstairs, this was a document, I think, dating from 1982, and basically you can read it. I haven't read the names of some of these alphabet soup agencies. The first order, they loved it, even the CIA. Okay. To show you a little bit of data, this is from the research side of the house. The photograph in the left side of the dam was generated after the response was given. This was a precognitive example. And the right-hand side is all the data that the subject produced. Nothing more. We did not edit it. We did not hide pages that were wrong. That was the total response. And you could just look at it and see that's not a bad approximation. And when this is not a statistical analysis, please don't beat up on me. If you want to see that, I can bore all of you to tears by doing that. Here's an operational example. The participant who I can name, he's no longer with us, named Ingo Swan, very talented fellow. He was given the geographical coordinates of someplace in Russia, about 20 kilometers north of Moscow. And he registered his psychic experience by building clay models instead of writing and drawing. And what he drew there was a truncated pyramid, four-sided pyramid, and he said when you cut it in half, you should never want to be inside of it when it's working. That's what he said in the transcript. They recorded what he was saying. And then the next picture down on the left is a patch. I've got something going on here. He couldn't figure out where that fit. And the next picture over it is a satellite image of that era. And the color picture is one of current. It's a truncated pyramid. It's 500 meters on the side. It is enormously huge. And it was exactly that. It's a over-the-horizon anti-ballistic missile radar site. And it's still in operation today. And my colleagues and I here and in Russia are putting together a multi-part documentary. And we have official permission to take film inside this building. There are a lot of nicknames for this particular project over the years, and all these nicknames were unclassified. So I could call up a colleague in Washington and say, hey, I want to come and talk about Gondola Wish. And they would know what I meant, I would know what I meant, and the spies listening in would have no idea, so called. And so here are a few of them. Grill Flame, Center Lane, Sunstreak, Quantum Leap I want to tell you about. I walked out of the Pentagon with an Army colonel. He said, "Dad, I've got great news for you. We just have a new nickname for your program, Quantum Leap." I said, "Do we have to? He says, what's wrong with you? I said, a quantum leap is the smallest possible progress above absolutely none. Can't we have a better name? So they said, yes, we have a better name. We called it Stargate, and that's where it's now known across the world as a program funded by the US government. However, kinder, gentler army. This was before the days of PowerPoint, and my colleague at Huntsville, Alabama, the Missile Intelligence Agency, was going to Washington to give a talk on grill flame. So he told the AI department, well, you know, this is about remote viewing and grill flame and so on, and here's the cover slide, which fortunately he never actually used. It's positively dreadful, and at least I got it before he went off to the Pentagon and described this. Here's a very brief history. I can't tell you about a 23-year program in a couple of hours or a matter of minutes, so this will be a one-slide short-form history. From Stanford Research Institute, used to be called, well, it used to be called that, it's now called SRI International. It was, up until the 70s, a research arm of Stanford University in Palo Alto. And we did work there from 72 to 1989 for a total of about 12.2 million euros at that time period. And then I shifted the program to Science Applications International Corporation, another huge organization, for another 4 years or so, and at about 5.5 million euros worth of money. Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ deserve huge credit for starting this program. I feel fortunate to be standing on tall shoulders. I could not have done what they did, and I had a different set of rules, and they probably would have had difficulty doing it my way also. So it's a nice blend of all of us. I joined the program actually in late 75 up to 1995, became the project director for the research from 1985 to 1995. All the research, there's no hidden jewels that I can't tell you about, have all been declassified in 1989. And as I said, we had more oversight than you could possibly think of, and later on you'll have a chance to look at what that was. And because of that, we made, I think, substantial scientific progress. From 72 to 1995, there's a whole list of people that not only knew about our program, but in fact approved it, including Jimmy Carter, Vice President George Bush, and a whole bunch of other people. You may not recognize their names, but these are top people in the intelligence and military world of the US government, knew about our program and approved it, I mean. They didn't improve it. Okay. You won't recognize any of these names, so the only reason I'm showing all of this is to give you an idea. This was not just a couple of people. There was a research team. They were not all there at the same time. Consultants and visiting scientists, those names you might recognize, Dean Radin and Jessica Utz. Even Evan Harris Walker, who was a well-known physicist in our field, who was a consultant for us. It's not well known, but we gave out something close to a little over 700,000 euros in subcontracts to the research community in parapsychology, to many of these places. Some were parapsychology and some were not. We gave some money to Bob Morris and Chuck Honerton, and they built their Ganzfeld with our money. The entire Ganzfeld apparatus was funded by us. Research, a little bit. As I said, we have two types of research applied to make it better, and protocols for operational remote viewing, how to identify reputable and calibrated participants. In other words, who are the good guys, and can they do it over and over again? Identify appropriate targets. You can't, if you wanted to know what's the combination of the safe in the head of Russia's office, that's the wrong kind of tasking. We can't get that information. So that's what I mean by identify appropriate targets. And could we develop countermeasures? No. Basic, how does this stuff work? And I hope during the question and answering period, you guys will be happy to tell me how it works, because at this stage, I have very little idea about it. But it's challenging. Remote viewing can provide useful information, useful intelligence information. Laboratory and operational remote viewing show the greatest potential for practical applications. This is a result of a meta-analysis of the SRI period data done almost exclusively by Jessica Utz. And these are some of her conclusions. Remote viewing ability does not degrade over time. We do not see, we very look measure for decline effect over, in some cases, 20 years of experience, and literally hundreds of remote viewings. If there's quite a variance up and down like that, it doesn't improve, which is very frustrating. It doesn't get better over time, but at least in our group, it didn't decay. And I think I have some ideas of why that's the case, because in other areas, we, as a field, struggle mightily with the decline effect. At this time, there's no quantitative evidence for support of training. And boy, that's frustrating. The government gave us large sums of money, millions of dollars actually, to be able to train Army personnel to collect data like this, and we just simply flat failed at that job. We could not do that. Because the definition of training is a little difficult. For example, if you try to train me to be a Wimbledon champion in tennis, don't. That would be a really stupid thing to do. What you can do is train me to whatever my natural skill level is, up to that level, how to attain my natural skill level. And I think in our field we over-mystify ESP. You say, oh, it's so weird. No. Let's at least start what we think we know about. For example, you can't train beyond people's skill level. And guess what? We find that in Psi as well. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people on the network, mainly retired Army people, that would not have any idea what they're talking about, think that you can train anybody up to be a a Wimbledon champion, so to speak. Natural scenes are significantly better, the symbols and targets, and a bunch of other stuff. There's no evidence to support psychoenergetic interaction with the physical world. We spent a substantial amount of money, and all of our PK research is in this book. We spent a lot of money on it, and we cannot confirm to see under laboratory conditions psychokinesis. That's not to say that it doesn't exist. You can never prove that statement. All you can say is we have not yet seen it. Other people might, and there's some people here, I'm pleased to say, is taking very good new research on that, and I wish you all the luck in the world, but it won't work. But give it a try. Electromagnetic shielding electromagnetic shielding is not effective against psychoenergetic acquisition of information. Okay, here's a brief idea of some of the oversight. During the SRI years up to 1985, there were various organizations who looked over us to make damn sure we weren't cheating or fooling ourselves, or bad protocols or questionable research practices, which is the modern phrase for such things, important as it is. I apologize for coughing as much, I'm not usually normally that way. 1985 to 1995, the whole game shifted. I had a $10 million contract from the Army Medical Research Development Command, and so we could hire the best possible people who were skeptics but open-minded to oversee what we have. And later on, if you want to see those names, I'm happy to show them to you. We had 3. Scientific Oversight Committee, whose job it was to review our protocols before we did our experiments. And we'd go back and forth until we get an agreed upon protocol. And then they had drop-in privileges, which they never actually used, unannounced. But then their most valuable contribution is they reviewed each of our final reports. For example, in my year, when I took over the project in 1987, I had $1.875 million. I know that number really well, because at the end of the year, I was $500 overspent, which I consider that an economic miracle. But I had a full colonel who was sitting there from the Army overlooking me, spent 2 weeks on company money to find that effing $500. I said, hey, I'll write you a check. He said, nope. It was really a pain. But that's when we would send out our final reports to this august body of research or scientists, skeptical, and they were to review our program in writing. And that's in volume 2 of this book, their comments. And we could comment back. And that was from my speaking as the top thrill in my entire academic career, was interacting with these people. We won about 85% of the arguments we had with them, but the real good thing that I love about the most was the 15% of the arguments we lost, because we learned how to improve ourselves and really have a chance of figuring out what's going on. We had an institutional review board. I don't know what you call that here. It's human use committee. We had to make sure that we weren't torturing our subjects, at least too badly. And lastly, we had a policy oversight committee from the federal government to see whether we were still on the right path, given the intelligence mission of this entire project. Some accomplishments, I'm going to tell you some non-accomplishments later. Fundamental testable model of experimental psi, what we call decision augmentation theory, is simply the most unpopular model in history. People that I know here, like my friend Dick, I don't think buys that story at all. But nonetheless, the data seems to support it. And it takes away cherished hypotheses. Let me tell you a little first-hand experience with that. I hate this model. I did what's called a pre-stimulus response experiment. I would measure somebody's skin conductance on their hand, and every once in a while, every 30 seconds plus or minus 10 seconds, they would get a huge sound for 97 decibels of white noise in their ears. Scare the hell out of you. And you jump off your chair, and you get this huge response. And we got an amazing amount of data showing that that really works, that the autonomic nervous system responded in advance of sound compared to in advance of control. So, wow, that's my cherished hypothesis. It all went away. We could find out it was not the autonomic nervous system responding, it was whoever pushed the button to start the experiment were using their side to make it look like that. And I have 3 cartoon slides to illustrate this later on. We have a thermodynamic model based on entropy, target characteristics, information transfer bit rates. It's very crude. In informational theory, informational science, people worry about transfer bit rates. If you listen to your favorite symphony with tin cans and a string, it's not very good. But if you listen to it through high definition audio, it's beautiful. And the difference is the bandwidth, how much information you can get through in that electromagnetic spectrum. And so our bit rate here is positively dreadful, even worse than the telephone system in California. Research methodology to elicit high quality psi nearly on demand, almost on demand, not quite. That raises a second question later on. A host of practical applications of psi and development of a testable model of precognition. Some failures. Notice that poor guy up there staring at his feet. We did not develop a valid psi training methodology. It just didn't work. Did not develop a successful confidence calling procedure so that we knew, pay attention to this response, but not that one. We failed at that. Did not identify personality factors that were predictive of psi performance, so we spent a lot of effort trying to do just that. Was not effective educating government personnel in the proper psi protocols. We failed miserably at that. We claim it's their fault, not ours. Okay, that's the end of the formal talk. I'm happy to, I don't know what the timing is, we can come back later, or how much time do we have?
No, it's okay. I had a program that I don't know about heart.
You're the boss.
Let the people first say how they want to proceed.
Okay, let me tell you what this slide is. The top one is, the numbers are 10, like in this one, is how many slides there are in that particular laboratory approach. How do we do this in the lab? How do we analyze the data? And there's an 11-minute video in that particular thing showing remote viewing. So the guy on camera, first time he ever did it on national television in the US. Oversight committee, 3 slides, no video. Metaphasic model of precognition is a 16-slide formal theory paper with 2 videos, one 4 and one 3 minutes. Decision augmentation theory, I can show you that. That's really quick. 3 slides. Where are we? Okay. Imagine what do you call it, a drug trial. And you've got a population like that, and often in these drug trials you have a control condition, and you have a treatment condition, and you have an unbiased process to sort this population into various groups, all right? And then you have the assistant who doesn't know about anything and is either given a placebo or the actual drug you're testing. And I made up a statistic which is not unlike the real statistics in these kinds of studies for medical practices. That's the causal interaction of how effective that particular medicine that she's testing. This is how you do it. The problem is, in any real population, there's not homogeneous anything. Sex differences, age differences, severity of disease differences, and so on and so on. If you're in the United States and you get a contract from the National Institutes of Health to do a study, you are obligated not to do the randomization of subjects. I don't know if you know that. And around medical schools in the whole US, there are little cottage industries of companies whose sole job it is to do the randomization because they don't even know what the hell the study is about, and so they're not biased in any way. So here we have a population, and we have a really healthy one who eats well and works out, and he's nice and in good shape. And we have a really skinny guy who eats candy all day long and watches television. And here we have the same thing, control group, except now we have a putative side-biased random process. In other words, you could use your psychic ability by pressing a button in such a way to put most of the healthy people in that group and most of the unhealthy group in the control group and tell the poor assistant who doesn't know to take the drug out completely and get the same statistic. This is what's called decisional limitation, a using person's psi, usually below their level of conscious awareness, to in fact make it look like the terrorist hypothesis was true. Okay.
Can I just...
He hates this idea, but go ahead.
No, not at all. Actually, I would like to support you because we have a very interesting example from the distant healing research. In distant healing, there is one condition where where distant healers try to improve the health of some target persons, right? And then we have a control group. And again, the way they do that is by randomizing. They have the original group of patients, and then they randomize the patients into the control group and into the treated group. Okay. Now there is a very interesting consequence of this model that you didn't mention, but the consequence will be that the non-treated group will perform basically worse than the average, because you put all the patients that are already skinny and non-well-fed into the non-treated group. So you really get people dying sooner in the non-treated group than the average. And actually this happened.
Yeah.
There's one study by Elizabeth Dark.
Yep,
it's well known because it's a fascinating study. I think she did two studies. One was on AIDS, I think HIV study, and there the people that were non-treated died earlier than if you looked at the average. And she did another study where the same thing happened, but there was another issue here in the other study. It was on a type of cancer which was really rare. She did that study, and you won't believe it, she got the same cancer later on and died of it. So that was really strange.
Thank you, that's really good.
Anyway,
I'll finish this up and then we'll go to questions and answers.
Can I say one thing more?
Sure.
I think we really need a little film to show how such a trial works. So
Okay.
we go for laboratory approach.
Okay. Hey, he's only the boss, and there's other work. Spy examples, which are also of interest to people, and then the Russian story. I've spent almost 22 times in Moscow, talking with former KGB guys who are now my friends, which is oddly enough, and some of the work that was last there in December 2015. no snow in Moscow. Can you imagine that in December? There wasn't any. And lastly, that. So you want to see the lab approach? Do we have time for that? Because there's a big...
Yeah, well, we can now stop for a moment. We have 10 minutes presentation by, or basically discussion by Paul, then a break,
Okay.
then you get July, and then you get a second part, right?
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, so
Is there a place
Paul-
to go to a movie somewhere nearby?
it's interesting to listen to Jacob, although it will be in Dutch. Jacob, is it in Dutch?
Whatever you prefer. He prefers Dutch.
Yes, I think our members prefer Dutch.
Yes.
Anyway, Paul, where are you? Grab the microphone.
Yes, grab it. I'm just trying to
I
not
apologize for speaking in Dutch, but I think it's easier for the audience. Ik ben Paul Groeneboom, ik zit in het bestuur en een van mijn bezigheden is daar ook het coördineren van de studiekringen. Daar staat wat over op de website, daar kunt u nog wat meer lezen, daar kunt u zich opgeven. Maar ik wil toch ook hier een oproep doen om iets meer bekendheid aan te geven en kijken of mensen geïnteresseerd zijn om zich daar verder bij aan te sluiten. De studiekringen, een van de doelstellingen daarvan is inderdaad dat leden gewoon de mogelijkheid wordt geboden om gezamenlijk of met andere mensen of op een eentje eventueel om eventueel wat studies op het gebied van parapsychologie te doen of gerelateerde gebieden. Dat is natuurlijk toch behoorlijk veel eisend om dat op een redelijke manier te doen. We kunnen daarbij helpen. Maar iets anders is inderdaad dat er informatie gewoon gedeeld wordt. Dat er wordt door de leden worden dan voordrachten gegeven, kunnen discussies worden gegeven over gebieden die met het paranormale of met bewustzijn te maken. En dat is dan ook wel wat breder dan formeel de vereniging voor staat. Dat blijkt gewoon in de praktijk dat mensen daar graag daarover willen hebben. Er bestaan in principe 3 kringen. Er is eentje in Amsterdam, er is eentje in Den Haag, die ik dan ook leid. En er is eentje die nog zoekt naar leden en dat is in Zeeland. Die zoekt nog helemaal naar leden. Ik zal daar zo nog even op terugkomen. Ik wil even nog, ik heb een klein lijstje gemaakt van wat onderwerpen die bij de kringen in Amsterdam en Den Haag recentelijk of de afgelopen 2 jaar aan de orde zijn geweest. Kunt u daar wat aan doen. In Den Haag hebben we het geprobeerd met bandstemmen. Dus te kijken of je op een elektronisch apparaat stemmen kunt opvangen die mogelijk zouden kunnen zijn van overleden mensen. Dat is natuurlijk ook iets wat behoorlijk controversieel is. Dat was geen succes, dus dat hebben we helaas moeten afbreken. Er waren ook wat technische problemen. In Amsterdam, ik ben daar zelf niet bij geweest, maar ik heb wel gezien wat voor lijstjes dat zijn. Het is gegaan over meditatie, over regressie, hypnose, over healing, dus paranormale geneeswijzen, intuïtieve ontwikkeling en graancirkels. Nou, dat zijn inderdaad wat onderwerpen die wat van de mainstream parapsychologie, als je het erover zou kunnen hebben, van afwijken. In Den Haag hebben we een tijd lang een aantal onderwerpen gehad die met voortbestaanshypothese te maken hebben, in het bijzonder kleine doodervaringen en reïncarnatie en natuurlijk ook dat stemmenfenomeen. We hebben het gehad over synchroniciteit en toeval, over kwantummechanica en parapsychologie en de invloed van straling op de mens en de gezondheid. Dus dat zijn wat onderwerpen. Ik denk dat alle kringen wel welkom zijn of blij zijn als er nieuwe mensen eventueel die geïnteresseerd zijn erbij zouden kunnen komen. En ook als er mensen zeggen van, nou, ik wil wel ergens anders, bijvoorbeeld in Utrecht, Arnhem of Leeuwarden, ik noem maar wat, zeggen van, nou, ik zou eigenlijk wel zo'n groep willen hebben. Die kunnen zich dan bij mij of bij iemand anders van het bestuur natuurlijk opgeven. Maar in de eerste plaats wil ik vragen van Tom, waar ben je gebleven? Ja, die even opstaan misschien. Tom Veldman uit Middelburg, die zoekt leden voor zijn kring. En ja, ik wil dus een oproep doen voor mensen die zeggen van, nou, ik zou wel naar Zeeland ergens willen komen, om dan met enige regelmaat een bijeenkomst te hebben, die kan zich melden bij Tom, of bij mij natuurlijk ook. Dus,
het heet op dit moment Brabant Zeeland, dus ja.
Ja, en West-Brabant.
Ja. Dus dat kan Rosina alweer daar zijn. En Middelburg is natuurlijk een beetje uit de richting, maar ja, iedereen die interesse heeft. We hebben al een keer samen met Paul's bijeenkomst gehad in Middelburg, ging over poltergeist en survival reïncarnatie. En ja, daar was best wel belangstelling over. Mensen kunnen dan ook hun eigen ervaringen, dus discussie, interactie, en dan gaat het echt leven. Ja.
Ja, prima.
Hartelijk welkom.
En misschien in Vlaanderen mochten er nog mensen uit België aanwezig zijn. Ik denk dat dat ook nog een mogelijkheid is. En ik heb begrepen dat Robert uit Amsterdam niet aanwezig kon zijn. Is er iemand die van Amsterdam, misschien even opstaan, uw naam is?
Ja, ik ben Frans van Hoeven. Ja. Ik zit in de groep Amsterdam en moet ik even daar komen?
Nee hoor, nee, daar blijven staan, maar misschien even de microfoon gemakkelijk.
Ik ben daar vergadervoorzitter. En ja, onze groep bestaat uit meestal zijn er zo'n 10 leden aanwezig. We hebben een lijst van een stuk of 13. En iedere keer proberen we een programma samen te stellen voor de volgende keer. Zo eens in de 2 maanden, 3 maanden vergaderen we bij iemand aan huis. En dat gaat op zichzelf prima. Wat wel opvalt, dat is, je begint met een aantal leden. En dan zijn er een aantal leden die zeggen, nou, ik wil er ook wel bij komen. Maar dat is misschien alleen van Amsterdam en die komen nooit. Dus we zijn eigenlijk een heel stabiele groep. En ja, we zijn begonnen met een interessant verhaal over Paul, over kwantummechanica. En ja, dat was heel interessant. Uiteindelijk heeft Paul daar ook nog een boek over geschreven. Dat vonden we boeiend. En we hebben ook aan graancirkels aandacht besteed. Dat was ook interessant. En over reïncarnatie, daar hadden we nog wat oude filmpjes van Paul. Dus ja, dat is het zo'n beetje. Dus iedere keer kijken we wat zouden we nog meer aan onderwerpen kunnen doen. En we laten ook de mensen wat vertellen, wat ze zelf vinden, waar ze zelf het over willen hebben. Is dit duidelijk genoeg?
Ja, bedankt. Dat wijst meteen op een omissie dat ik had gezegd van ook de groep van Den Haag heeft ongeveer dezelfde ledenaantal en frequentie van bijeenkomsten. Dus hierbij wil ik het laten. En voor jou natuurlijk, voor mensen in de omgeving Den Haag, die zijn welkom om ze bij mij aan te melden, want er is nogal mogelijkheden om hier mensen te hebben. Wat een vraagje.
Wanneer worden de bijeenkomsten gehouden? Overdag of 's avonds?
Meest in Den Haag is dat in principe altijd 's avonds. Alhoewel ik het er recentelijk wel heb opgeworpen van ja, misschien voor wat oudere mensen dat het prettig is om eventueel toch eens een keertje te proberen in het weekend. Maar dat hebben we nog niet geprobeerd. Dus in Amsterdam is het, dacht ik zover ik weet, ook alleen 's avonds.
Nou, nu hebben wij toevallig de komende bijeenkomst dus op een zondag. Maar uiteindelijk werken we met de datumkiezer. En zo kiezen we dan de datum dat zoveel mogelijk mensen kunnen.
Ja.
Maar het is ook meestal 's avonds, maar dit is de eerste keer volgens mij dat in het weekend.
Ja. Maar dat is in overleg.
Oh.
Het zo
Zaterdag, geen zondag, zaterdag. Oké.
Moet je lid zijn van een vereniging om deel te kunnen nemen aan studiegroepen?
Het hoeft in eerste instantie niet, maar we zouden het wel zeer op prijs stellen als dacht van nou ja, als meer dan 1 keer komt om dan
Dus dan
toch wel lid te worden.
Ja,
Ja.
lid worden. Ja, oké.
Ja.
Nou, dat-
Ja, of partner van.
Nee, maar voor de kosten hoef je niet te laten. Volgens mij was het 27 euro per jaar of wat is het? Of nog geen 30 euro per jaar. Dan krijg je nog een prachtig tijdschrift 4 keer per jaar. Nou, wat wil je nog meer?
Die blijven zijn ook in de kant. Oké.
Er staat op de site staat een lijst van de verschillende regio's waar een groep. Ik ging ervan uit dat daar al mensen waren die dan daar de leiding voor op zich, zoals Nijmegen, voor, dacht ik, aan Pieter Schie was. Maar het is misschien mijn idee. Maar is dat niet zo? Ik bedoel, want jullie hebben het nou over drie regio's, maar die andere, dat is dus eigenlijk nog helemaal koffiedik. Wie daar. Of daar
Klopt,
iets
daar
op.
zeggen van daar is een complete vacature, want er is ook dan niemand die momenteel leiderschap heeft.
Nee. Okay.
Het valt te overwegen of we dat misschien op de website moeten aanpassen.
Ja,
Bedankt.
misschien wel, het maakt de indruk dat het al een beetje bestaat eigenlijk.
Ja. Mhm.
Ja.
Ja, en belangrijk nog om te weten, de SPR sponsort waar nodig ook de studiekringen. Dus dat betekent dat de onkostenvergoedingen in kleine mate vergoed worden voor het hapje, drankje of eventueel de huur van de zaal binnen bepaalde marges. Dat weet ik alweer de studiekring voorzitter.
Ja. Oké.
En ook als er kleine onderzoekjes worden gedaan, dan is het ook mogelijk om advies te krijgen vanuit het bestuur of vanuit experts die dan die onderzoeksgroepjes gaan begeleiden. En daar kan dan ook wat geld vandaan komen, hoewel we geen geld hebben. Ja, dat is iedereen om dit niet te worden. Maar we vinden het zo belangrijk dat we proberen toch dat te stimuleren. Daarmee is de kop eraf. En u krijgt nu een half uur de tijd om een kopje koffie te gaan drinken, met elkaar te praten. Met het mee bijvoorbeeld aan te schieten persoonlijk. En er liggen een aantal tijdschriften op de leestafel, in welk hoek, in die hoek geloof ik, ergens, vlak bij de koffieautomaat. Die kunt u meenemen. Daar mag u gewoon eentje van pikken en dan onder de voorwaarde dat u dat dan probeert daarmee weer een lid te werven. Dus daar ligt ook nog een boekje. Er liggen verschillende dingen. Er liggen ook de archief weer neer en het boek van de heer Bogaert. Maar daar ligt ook een klein boekje dat ik u van harte aanbeveel. Dat is het boekje Mental Radio, geschreven door de Amerikaanse schrijver Upton Sinclair, die in de jaren 2030 eigenlijk het remote viewing protocol eigenlijk al uitvoerde. Dus, en dat kwam er dan op neer dat iemand ver weg, geografisch echt ver weg, zijn vrouw meestal, een willekeurig onderwerp, een tekeningetje maakte en dan ging hij proberen dat tekeningetje na te maken. Er staan duizenden voorbeelden in dat boekje. Het meest interessante vind ik aan dat boekje dat ik daar altijd naar kan refereren als ik behoefte heb aan name dropping. Dat het voorwoord is geschreven door niemand minder dan Albert Einstein. Dus als je daar naar gaat kijken, dan ze kunnen nooit zeggen, nee, met pseudo-wetenschap. Ja, nou, Albert Einstein deed daar kennelijk ook aan. Dus dat kunt u even bekijken. Ik wil u graag over een half uur terug hebben, dat is 4 over half 3.
En de mensen die nog moeten betalen, die kunnen ook nu pinnen.
Penningmeester.
Nu even aan de hand.
Ja, dat ging.